Amidst the surge of the second wave of COVID-19 and the Nigeria Center for Disease Control exclaiming that hospitals are overwhelmed, Nigeria's government has resolved to go ahead with the January 18th resumption date for schools nationwide. Well, joining us to speak on this and other headlines this week is someone who works at a school himself. It is, of course, the Associate Professor at Bayes University, Dr. Biodun Adeniyi. Good morning to you, Doctor. Good to see you again. If we were to start with this new decision...
Good morning, Adefemi and Aaron.
Yeah, good morning, Dr. Adeniyi.
If we were to start with this decision to resume schools, reopen schools on the 18th of January, where do you stand on it? Of course, we know that you are in the business of education and you definitely want to continue that as soon as possible, but I'd imagine you'd want to do that as safely as possible. So at a time where the entire country and indeed the world is talking and lamenting about a second wave, we already know that there's been an upturn in positive cases because on one hand people are testing more, but definitely because there are more cases in this country. Is this really a good time to put our children and our students at risk by having them resume classes as normal?
Well, thank you, Adefemi. It's a very tight catch-22 situation, really. And what is obviously emerging is that something has to give, and we have to really find a way of equating our life, with our livelihood, irrespective of the pandemic.
It looks like we've lost Dr. Adeniyi, but while we work on getting him back, I'm sure we could discuss going back to school. See, Aaron, I'm not a parent. I don't know if you are. But it does seem as though...
Soon enough.
Really? Is that exclusive? Let me know. It does seem as though there's definitely some concern going around about whether or not students should resume as normal. I understand that schools are saying that it won't be business as usual because, of course, with the education that we've all learned from COVID-19, there are going to be protocols in place, how to keep students socially distanced. Even Indy yesterday was talking about his daughter's plans to resume school and their checklist of making sure that they have adequate masks and hand sanitizers. But at the same time, like I was telling him yesterday, it does feel as though children are I keep on saying children as though they're young, but indeed, our students across age groups aren't being protected as well as they should be. I understand that, you want to keep things going as normal as possible, but if we're talking about a pandemic, can we not keep our kids at home?
No, but it's imperative they go back to school. That's the first thing we must... Actually, that's the base we must actually justify, first of all, that they must go back to school. At some point in time, we cannot keep them at home forever.
Yes.
But now the question is, how do you make that happen? Is now, like Dr. Adeniyi was saying, the catch-22. Because, first of all, the requisites that will be required by the schools should be different because how you treat age grades, probably 3 to 10, will be quite different from the ones you treat that are in secondary school and those in the tertiary institutions. So if you actually map that out, then the second thing is about execution. If there are no prompt and swift and the detailed execution of some of those protocols, the aim of taking them back to school will be defeated. Because firstly, it must be noted that schools are super spreaders, regardless of what you want to say. But we know that when you put them on the scale of preference, education for these young lads is very, very critical. But schools will already remain super spreaders, and those who go to schools will always be at risk.
Understood.
Yes.
I just don't think it makes sense. If even the government itself is telling a certain band of civil servants that they should continue working from home, and private sector industries are keeping their clientele at home as their employees rather at home as much as they can. I just don't understand why society seems to think that children are resilient to this virus. So what is the point of keeping all of these adults at home if you want these children to go out and then come back in? It just defeats the purpose.
Initially, the first variant of the COVID-19 virus, where it was established that it was less potent on the younger demographic as against the older demographic. So probably they were basing it on that. But this second variant, I'm not so sure. So it's very difficult. It can be done. But it's almost like walking on eggshells. It can be done. It should be done. But priority and focus must be placed on ensuring protocols are adhered, lest we have something worse than it was, or even worst case scenario, we have a case whereby we've seen a massive spike, and what is responsible for that is the reopening of schools, and they would have to shut the schools ultimately again.
Exactly.
All right, I think Dr. Adeniyi is with us again. So Dr. Adeniyi, you can pick it up from where you left off the last time.
Yeah, okay, if you can hear me now, I was saying that it's been a long day, since we've been trying to resolve the pangs of this pandemic. And of course, it's a catch-22 situation. We do not know how long more we have to wait if we have to continue to give that excuse that the disease is around the corner, so schools should not resume. I think what we should necessarily do is to be concerned about ingraining the non-pharmaceutical measures, aimed at preventing the spread or mitigating the spread, really. And of course, if we say that we have undergraduate students, they're in a very good position, they're in a good stead, to be compliant, with these non-pharmaceutical measures. What we need to concentrate upon, really, which I think we are fatigued about, is behavioral change, really, so that we can understand that this disease, the vaccines are coming, but they are still slow in coming. There are so many bureaucracies around it. But what we need to do now is just behavioral change, lifestyle change, social lifestyle modification, so that we can mitigate it. And if we've been carrying out this campaign in the town in the last 1 year, there's no reason why we cannot also carry out the campaign in the schools, really. To that extent, you will say that, again, if the markets are open, yes, we understand the temporariness of interaction in the marketplaces. We understand that there's an air of permanence more around the schools, but I think behavior change, communication, and campaign can be very, very helpful, really. And I'm aware that guidelines have been issued by NUC, and if private institutions have largely been compliant with these guidelines in the last 1 year, even though in the last 1 year, even though they've been essentially virtual, I do not see any reason to why public institutions should not be encouraged, to also be compliant, at least to just continue with our lifestyle, which has been the campaign over the years, that it is very important at some point for us to find an equilibrium between our life and our lifestyle in dealing with a once-in-a-century pandemic, which we do not know when it will go, really. I think we should not allow the pandemic to hold us down, irrespective of how virulent and irrespective of the fact that it's a very deadly one. But of course, death is always upon us anyway. It's something that will come when it will come, even though we do not wish it comes. At a time where we still hold promises for ourselves and the society. But again, we do not have this fear we do not have to let this fear let us down or whittle down our productivity and efficiency. So it's a welcome development that the NUC or the government is taking the bull by the horn. But what is more important again is for the government to help the institutions so that they can have the resources, to comply with the guidelines. That's my take, Adefemi and Aaron.
Dr. Adeniyi, you mentioned some critical things. I don't think the NUC shares the sentiments of the Ministry of Health and the PTF on the resumption of schools. But as a tutor yourself, this is what I want to focus on right now is the fact that when we look at it, you mentioned behavioral changes to be able to cope with the changing times or with the trying times as we have it right now. But some of these limitations, what bothers me is, wouldn't all these limitations and all these protocols put in place impede learning ultimately? Because when you look at it, over the years, centuries, we've actually had to tutor people in a certain kind of way. Now having to limit them or having to change that for the immediate, wouldn't it impede learning?
Well, Aaron, if I understand you very well, life is essentially about compliance, it's about rules, it's about regulations. And even at a personal, individual level, there are some things that we subscribe to at the level of principles, at the level of lifestyle, and such other things. Then on the larger scale of the society, we are guided by rules and regulations and more essentially laws. What the pandemic has brought about is additional laws, or additional regulations, additional rules, for us to power through life itself, and learning has no limitation. It's a continuous thing until the end of life, really. So individuals have the capacity to learn. Individuals have almost a limitless capacity to learn for as long as that individual is sound in mind, is sound and healthy. So it's a continuous thing, really. And the demand of the pandemic is for us to learn new things. And that's why we're talking about the new normal. So the new normal is for us to adopt the non-pharmaceutical measures. And it does not have respect for class, for group, irrespective whether it is income or otherwise. And I've made a point that if the marketplaces, if the churches, if the mosque at some point in time have been opened, and do not forget that I said that to some extent these areas are temporary, but of course every area, every gathering, every cluster of people can always be super spreader, like you alluded to in your earlier comment. We do know these things, but what is more important really is to be able to adapt, to adapt and adopt the new change, the new demand for us to adopt these non-pharmaceutical measures, face masking all the time, hand washing all the time, and social distancing. Social distancing, I understand, is the most difficult, which is very appreciable because it's about we interact on the basis of impulse. It's rather impulsive. But what about hand washing? What about the one that is relatively easiest, but again, likely the most effective, which is face masking? I'm afraid we're yet to adopt that. But what we need to do, really, particularly among the undergraduates that will be resuming across the various public institutions, is just to ensure that there's compliance. And if there's compliance, of course, we know that it can go a long way in mitigating the spread. I've had scientists, in civilized Western countries, said that face masking, if we are religious about it, can be as equivalent, in preventing the spread of the vaccine, the spread of the disease, as much as this vaccine. But we're only being fatigued, being lethargic about compliance, which I think the government, can now think about implementing it through the prism of the institutions and their authorities, as the case is in the circumstance, Aaron and Adefemi.
Thank you, Dr. Adeniyi. I wanted to ask you separately from this usual topic of education, which is that of fake vaccines. It was earlier this week you had NAFTAC Secretary General come out and say Nigerians should be aware that there are fake vaccines being brought into the country or in the country. And as it stands, nobody should take a vaccine for COVID-19 that has not been authorized and stamped by NAFTAC. Do you think that it's a situation that, with Nigeria already having a history with counterfeit medicine, do you think that this onset and this I guess, scramble to protect ourselves would result in people taking fake vaccines?
Well, yeah, thank you, Adefemi. Ahead of the release of the announcement that vaccines were headed for Nigeria, of course, there were speculations in places, that in Nigeria it would not be out of place if we begin to hear announcements around, the spread of fake vaccine. There's just something about us, that around circumventing processes, around trying to cut corners so that we can make quick gains, quick profits. We want to profiteer, while endangering the lives of people. It's just something unfortunate about some of us Nigerians and even by extension Africans. It's rather predictable. We anticipated it. That people will try to make some quick gains, from the release of the vaccines. And it's okay. It's welcoming that the authorities have identified this and they are issuing warnings. So the onus is on us to be much more careful, not to accept anything that is thrown at us in the guise of vaccine. Just like we have been careful beforehand in recognizing that there are differences in medicines. Some of them are fake, some of them can be real. We see it all around us, and we know some of these things. It's just, again, for us to transport that recognition on the difference between the original and the fake into the identification or the acceptance of vaccine. But again, the onus is going to be on the government, to be much more up and doing in preventing not just the spread of this vaccine, this fake vaccine, but the production itself, against the background of controversies around whether or not individuals should take the vaccine or not, and in addition to vaccine hesitancy, that is being projected or being campaigned about by some emerging advocacy groups. So all these things will have to be dealt with, as a whole, but it shouldn't be a problem really in us warning citizens against taking or accepting fake vaccines. Adefemi.
A lot of people have been clamoring that teachers also should be pushed forward in the pecking order, since we're talking about vaccines and distribution of vaccines, which will begin very soon. We hear that there are grants being given, and also there are vaccines being made available. Do you think teachers should be given priority, understanding that they also are at risk going out there and having to teach students who most of them are not even sure whether they are COVID-19 positive or negative?
Well, I think everyone that is at risk deserves to be prioritized, and of course the way it's been done in areas where the vaccine were first produced is that they prioritize the old, the septuagenarians, yes, the octogenarians, and again, those who are responsible for giving care, those in the front line, the medics, that is, and before it starts coming down in that pecking order. So it's a matter of privileging those who are more likely to die if they contract the virus, those with comorbidities, identifying them and targeting them with the vaccine jab. So that's what it is really. And if teachers are considered to be essential in that light, why not? But I'm not going to put teachers at an advantage, ahead of those who probably need it most. There are teachers who are young with strong immunity. I do not expect them, just because they are teachers, that they should be prioritized over an old, or someone else with comorbidity that is more likely to die in the event of contracting it. I do not know why you're singling out teachers, because I'm one. If I'm offered anyway, I will think about accepting it, because I know that at some point I'll be engaging physically with my students, and of course, nobody knows what can come up anyway, but it's just better to err on the side of error. So overall, I think, everyone will get it at the end of the day, but it's just a matter of priority, because we cannot all get it at once, but it's just a matter of time before it goes round, and by the end of the year, we should be expecting that a lot more citizens, will have had their jabs or their shot of the vaccine.
Fingers crossed, fingers crossed, fingers crossed. I was asking Aaron last week, or is it the week before?
Yeah, that's right.
Whether or not you'd feel comfortable taking the vaccine at this time. And I think as time goes on, I am definitely raising my hand up for a vaccine at this point. Just want it to be over and done with. I guess in the topic, in the vein of things being over, but perhaps not done with, also earlier this week, we know that there was a Remembrance Day for Nigeria's armed forces and their fallen comrades. If you were to identify any lessons learned from that process, what would that be? Or do you think this is a purely commemorative ceremony that doesn't really do much?
Adefemi, I think the event does a lot in terms of remembrance, in terms of helping us to rekindle memories of our fallen heroes. But essentially it also goes beyond January 15 into the end of the First World War, when the armistice was signed, and it started as a poppy day, 11th day of the 11th month, which is 11th of November, and of course in the pre-independence period, it was something. It continued up to the pre-independence period, and from the late 60s somehow, we adopted from 1970 essentially, we adopted January 15, which was the date, that the hostility between the federal troops and the Biafran forces ended. So that day is actually very symbolic, and more importantly, it's just meant to identify with the noble profession of the military. A very salutary position, profession, in the light of the fact that, they make a lot of sacrifices to protect the sovereignty of the nation, and to protect us all. What more can we give to them if not to continue to boost their morale, that if they die in the process, unfortunately, but first their motive, is not necessarily to die, or their aim is not necessarily to die, but if it happens, what can we do to boost their morale, realizing that morale is critical in their ability to function very well. So that commemoration is just part of the morale boosting effort, to let them know that overall they are going to be remembered for the sacrifice their colleagues have made in the past, and for the sacrifice they are continuing to make as well. And realizing that we are in dark times, a time of insecurity, a time where a lot is being expected of them. We are fighting insurgency, we are fighting bandits, we are fighting kidnapping and all sorts of criminality, and they play a critical role, in stopping or preventing these shenanigans. So remembering them is very, very important, and you realize that that day, has been held special by the Nigerian government, just like October 1. It's a day that we have to continue to obey, just like it is done in other parts of the world. In the US, it's called the Veterans Day, and in the UK, some other name as well. So it's a welcome development in terms of remembrance, in terms of memories, rekindling of memories, appreciating them, providing a platform for nostalgia, and recognizing the importance of sacrifice in nation building. And one discipline, one profession that makes the most sacrifice, really. Yes, other professions are also making sacrifices, but the military is key because they often always pay the supreme sacrifice, which is losing their life, even though they would ordinarily not desire to lose their life, because if all of them are dying, it means that there will be no one else to fight. The idea is not for them to die, but if it comes, because they are always on the line of fire, then they are accepted it often. The courage to do this is what we are remembering, on that Remembrance Day. So it's a salutary day, and it's we can only say, may the souls of the departed rest in peace, and God bless Nigeria.
All right, Dr. Adeniyi, the NUC has said schools could reopen for academic calendars by tomorrow. But also, on the other hand, is saying that the schools are not prepared for this reopening. Briefly, talk to us about this.
Yeah, it's been a back and forth in the last 1 year between NUC or the government and ASU. I understand the position of ASU, which is true, really, that the public schools are not prepared because the facilities are not there, the funds are probably not there, the resources to acquire equipment, or mechanisms to carry out the learning management system are probably not there, and it's going to be difficult for them to largely comply. That's the position ASU is making, but I don't think ASU is saying that schools should not reopen. I think they're just mainly calling the attention of government, to the downsides, to the impediment to smooth flow of academic activities just like they have been doing. So what government should probably do, if it is possible, is to intervene, perhaps at the level of providing some emergency funds for government to, for these institutions to prepare a better ground for the students
Dr.
to resume,
Adeniyi, we have to stop there. It looks like our time has just flown by today. It's been a great conversation. Thank you for joining us.